Thank you for joining me today on the Bold Lines podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about how people get fooled by research and how you can keep yourself from getting fooled yourself. I'm going to start today with a story that many people have heard before. I'm going to explain where all of the fun is happening. So, if you've spent any time walking the aisles of a Walmart and you look at all of the toothpaste and you decide to peruse through the labels, you'll find something rather interesting. One, I hope you're just perusing. Anyway, it's good to brush your teeth. But you can find something rather curious on the advertisements on the boxes for these toothpastes, where 4 out of 5 dentists recommend this brand of toothpaste. And while that might seem interesting for one brand, you look and the other brand says it too, and even the third and the fourth brand. So how can all of these brands of toothpaste all legitimately say that 4 out of 5 dentists recommend their brand of toothpaste? I will tell you, they're not lying. This is actually legitimate, heavy quotes, legitimate research that is happening. Although it's done through a sleight of hand, and I think it perfectly illustrates what we're going to be talking about today. So the way that this works is they bring a whole bunch of dentists, particularly 5 for this one, but they could repeat this measure as much as they'd like. And they ask them, all right, I need you to write down 3 toothpaste brands that you recommend. And so they take the list that they're given, those 3 to 5 brands, they collect them together. And funnily enough, 4 out of the 5 dentists have listed their particular brand as one of the brands that they would recommend. When the consumer reads 4 out of 5 dentists recommend this brand of toothpaste, what they assume that means is that this brand of toothpaste is their favorite, the only one they'd recommend. When in reality, they created a list, and that brand's name just so happened to be on it. And so, these toothpaste brands can completely legitimately say 4 out of 5 dentists recommend our brand. What does this have to do with research? I have seen nowadays that there's been this huge interest in this entity called the science. Now, is this going to get political? I don't know. I just started the episode. We'll just write it and see how it goes. But science is not some authoritarian entity. It is a tool. And unfortunately, in today's world, science is used as a weapon by every side of the aisle. It's really funny to watch both sides of a political movement say, believe the science. Well, you can't have both sides saying the exact same thing. Somebody has to be wrong, and the chances are it's both of them. So what is actual research? What is the good version of research and not some political tool? My favorite quote for research and science actually comes from Adam Savage from the show Mythbusters. Great part of my childhood and not exactly learning how science works, but getting interested in all of those things. Adam Savage said, the difference between science and screwing around is writing it down, which technically is true. Science can be done when you keep track of things. Good science is done when you keep careful track of things. Now, research is a little bit more complicated than just science. Research is an examination of patterns and processes. This is not just, I saw it happen once, and therefore it's the truth. We're going to talk about something a little bit later called a case study. That sort of tries to cross that gap, but doesn't quite make it. We'll say just reporting the patterns isn't enough. Let's say you decide to do some science as a child, and you say, man, I wonder what my brother will say when I smack him in the face. And so for the next week, at random times throughout the day, you smack him in the face, and you record what he says and does. Okay, you reported a specific pattern, but because it wasn't controlled and the participant will have differing responses over time, it doesn't exactly make it research. It's interesting, although it can get you grounded. It doesn't exactly meet the mark. Good research observes how different phenomena interact. How do things influence or challenge other aspects of reality? See, that's what research is. It's this repeatable observation of controlled criteria. I'm going to start with some of the really bad research. Then we'll talk about the good. The bad stuff is, it's really bad. There's this threshold that you get when you start working through higher academia. I think it happened within my first year of the PhD program that I'm in at the time of recording this episode. About a year in, I came to this realization that as I was learning how research worked and how its implications were put forward, most people have no idea how research works. They simply take the conclusions and they take the interpretation of a journalist or some media entity and assume that whatever they said the research put as a conclusion is true. And it's just not. Okay? Here's where some research goes really bad. First off, not all research is bad. Okay? I like research. I'm writing research, and in my PhD program, in order to graduate, you have to do research. Okay? So I'm not anti-research. I'm not anti-science. Okay? Here's some big issues of today. One, research is now a commodity. I don't think most people really understand this, or if they do, they take it to an extreme. Research itself, particularly the results that they put out, are a commodity that you can buy and sell. Research itself is not profitable. If you do research, chances are you will get very little financial kickback. You do it because you like it, unless you are a part of a group or organization that gets some sort of benefit from research being put out. Now, keen listeners can say, well, isn't that unethical? Oh, yes, it is. In research papers, you have to put financial conflicts of interest, or just conflicts of interest in general. Here's the thing. If it's not directly related to the study, you don't have to put it. And the conflicts of interest that you can find at the bottom of research studies are done on the honor system. So someone could legitimately say, hey, my drug needs to get some positive reviews. I'm going to give this university money, but it doesn't go directly to you. But wink, wink, it might go to you. If that researcher were to take that money through the university, they don't technically have to put it as a conflict of interest. I heard something a while ago that I think really shaped my understanding of how much research has become a commodity is if you can buy politicians, you can buy researchers. This is not going to be a total slam on research, but we do have to understand the reality of research itself. Some other huge problems that I've seen, there are people who put out obscene numbers of research studies per year, okay? To give you some sort of an idea, in order to just get my research project approved, okay? It's taking months, and it's taking planning, and it's taking all of this insight just to get it started, let alone getting it written, getting the feedback, and getting it all done, okay? There are researchers, and I don't think I'm going to name them here, where they put out like 6 to 7 a year. I'm going to lay it out there. That's unethical. There's no way that you have been intimately involved in that many research settings and done good work. It just doesn't happen. You're either signing your name to things because you like the results, or you're doing some really unethical stuff. The last big issue that I see in bad research, and we're going to talk about some specific problems, but one of the big issue is that a lot of researchers will assume a result with an incorrect participant. The biggest one that I see in modern culture is people will say that, well, gender transition has an almost 0% regret rate. It's like 1 to 3%, depending on what you ask. Okay, one, red flags should be everywhere. There's not really a cosmetic surgery that has that degree of regret. That just doesn't happen. That's obscene. If you go and you look at the research methods, here's the thing. They didn't ask the people who had the surgery. They asked the plastic surgeons if their patients had regret. And see, this is some of the sleight of hand that I was talking about earlier, where technically you could say something is true, but the sleight of hand that you do in order to get that result is something that the general public doesn't know to look for. Here's some big problems if you want to look at data itself, okay? You need to see if someone is making an assumption before the data is even put out. You can see this a lot in introductions and literature review sections. If you don't want to slog through it, that's okay. Find someone who can. But a lot of researchers will make an assumption before the data is presented. You see this in some of those people that have obscene numbers of research articles. They already know the answer they want. They just got to do the data to get it. Research is also insanely expensive because publications will gouge you for them. Some people aren't aware of this, but in order to get a research article put online on one of these online databases, it can be up to 12 grand. You heard me correctly. In order to get a paper put on an online database for some organizations, that's $12,000. And do you know how much the authors get? Next to nothing. That's why if you email them directly, they'll send it to you because it's a racket. Nobody else will publish these articles. That's what they're forced to do. But if you email them directly, chances are they'll send it to you. Here's another big issue: publication bias. This is something that can have its own entire episode. But researchers will skew results in order to get a positive publication review. If it doesn't give you any result, or what we would call a null result, wow, look at how amazing you are for this positive or negative thing that you showed. God forbid you just found that nothing happened. With little financial reward, high level of expenses, you can start to see how researchers can be bought, how they studied a desired interaction instead of just something in general. It's kind of like pointing in a direction that you want and spearheading it towards the outcome that you're looking for. One huge red flag for anyone, and I'm going to talk about this in what good research looks like, look for control groups. If you don't know anything about research, but you just want to know whether it's worth trusting, look for a control group. What does that mean? I'm going to tell you another short story. I'll explain it real quick. Did you know that people with horses tend to live longer? Scientific fact. The science is settled. People who have horses live longer. Without a control group, you might assume, well, doggone it, horses are just magical, aren't they? Except that it has nothing to do with the horses. It has everything to do with access to money and healthcare. Typically, those that can afford horses can afford adequate healthcare, and so they live longer. Without a control group, you'd have no idea. You would just think that those who have horses live longer. Without a control group and saying, I wonder what happens when people don't have horses but have the same amount of money and healthcare. Oh, wow, they get the same result? Yeah, that's why control groups are important. And that's why so many of the social movements in research are such garbage. They don't have control groups. You don't actually know what you're studying, so you get to make it up. Here's some signs of good quality research. 1, it takes time. If the phenomenon was made up 2 months ago and there's already a research article on it, chuck it. They pushed that thing out so that they can be relevant. Think of it like, I don't know, a nerdy Twitter page. Some current event happened and you want to be relevant. So let's put out a publication. Okay? Good research takes time. It takes a lot of time. Why? Because you have to examine long-term effects. I harped earlier on the gender transition thing because I think it perfectly encapsulates where a lot of quote-unquote science doesn't mean good quote-unquote science. One of the big things around all these kinds of treatment is regret rates. If you measure regret 6 months after a procedure or the start of a medication, puberty blocker, whatever it is, and you say, look, 98% of people are thrilled. You don't know what happens 10 years down the road. What happens if it flips the opposite direction? You would have no idea. But because of the implication that you give, it can make it seem like it's a miracle cure. So good research will not happen immediately after something pops up. If it does, there should be a huge red flag. Good research includes blind studies and control groups. Let me explain what blind studies are. Blind studies are when particularly a medication is given to 2 people and one is given a placebo, something that's not real, it just appears real, and one is given the actual drug. Okay? They both think they're getting the drug, but they're not actually sure which one got it. Okay? It's a blind study, or a rudimentary explanation. I already talked about control groups. It's when you don't do the thing that you're studying to see if it replicates or if it's still different. Another big thing, follow-up groups. Congrats, you made somebody feel better 3 months after your study concluded. That doesn't mean anything. Wow, your treatment worked for someone's year of life afterwards. So what? They grow up, they have kids. When they look back, do they regret it? You wouldn't know because you didn't study it. Okay? Follow up, follow up, follow up. Also, research has to be repeated multiple times by different people. Good research will have data sets available. So those third-party people can go back and check on their math, as it were, to see. If the results can't be repeated, they're full of crap. Okay? If it's just this one magical study that came out, or all of these magical studies that can't be replicated, they're probably full of crap. If a study doesn't make conclusions, but they just make suggestions, you should feel encouraged. If a study is saying, wow, this is what we should do and this is exactly what it means, chuck it. It's a political move. It's not a research-oriented one. Good research is also built upon. It should be rooted in other things. And there shouldn't be this circular reasoning. One of the big things, particularly with the gender research, is there's a few organizations that each call on one another. They don't actually build on anything to preserve a sense of legitimacy. They just all use each other as a form of legitimacy. It's kind of like saying, well, yeah, me and my 3 friends all say he's a good guy. What about outside entities? What do they say? Well, no, it doesn't matter. Me and my 3 friends all say he's a good guy. Does that make him a good guy, or is that just because how we've selected the people to respond? Big deal there. The gold standard for research, by the way, is a systematic review. There's a big one that came out recently. We love systematic reviews. If you've learned nothing, we love systematic reviews, okay? Because it collects all of the data that's relevant. It sorts out things that aren't relevant. And if done correctly, it can tell you how useful results are based on some of the things that we talked about. You can evaluate the level of confidence in a result. Systematic review can take a whole bunch of things and go, wow, that was a bunch of garbage. And here's why. We love systematic reviews. Love them. They're not perfect. They can be wrong, but they are the gold standard. What you should do with all this, because this can be a lot, and this is just surface level, everybody. If you don't know, find someone who does. Is there someone in your life that can actually read research, actually knows what they're talking about, and can see through a lot of the academic garbage? If this is something you're interested in, if you say, hey, I would like to know about research, but I'm not exactly sure who to talk to, I've actually been floating around an idea of some sort of newsletter or online portal that if people would be interested in me breaking down recent research or big political topics or whatever it is to see what research actually says, shoot me an email, TravisThompsonPodcast@hotmail.com. I'd be interested to see if there's anybody that wants that kind of insider feedback. So hit me up if that's something you're curious about. Learn buzzwords. And if you see buzzwords in research articles and it's not just a reference, it's the entire thing, you can be sure that they're probably full of crap. If you see how this treatment affects someone's sense of well-being or thriving or any of this other bull crap, right? Chuck it. They have a publication bias and they want to be put out there, okay? If the conclusions seem absolutely ridiculous, put a big question mark. Oh my gosh, this treatment's 99.9% effective? Yeah, you should probably be curious, okay? You should wonder what in the world's going on here. Either they have a miracle cure or they have snake oil. If you're ever unsure about what the evidence is saying, what research is saying, wait. Wait to see if there are other researchers or academics that call it out. If some report comes out and people wave it around as some sort of second messiah that's showing up, wait. Give it a year or two. And I know that's not in vogue in today's climate. Give it some time. Because it's likely that people who are doing good research won't put theirs out quickly because they want it to be done well. So, in conclusion in all of this, if you don't know how research works, find someone who does. If you're interested in how it works, there's resources that you can look at. If you're interested in myself or someone like me pouring through this in an unbiased but honest way, shoot me an email, TravisThompsonPodcast@hotmail.com, or just be skeptical. Just be curious and ask for replication and see how things play out over time. Thank you for listening today. I hope you found something useful. This was an episode I've wanted to do for a while, so I'm glad I got to actually record it. If you found this to be useful, I hope that you follow the show. Give me some feedback if you think this is something you'd want me to do more of. You can also submit a question to the podcast. There will be a link in the notes of this episode. I hope that you can share this with people as well. Maybe they could use some support and learning through all the craziness that gets put out there. If you feel the need, you can leave something in the tip jar so I can help pay for the production of this podcast. But I hope you found all of this useful, something that can enrich and benefit your own life, help you understand the world better.